In this video, we're going to discuss using whiteboards for online teaching and getting a good camera setup for doing so. I am using a C922 Logitech camera. It's a rather expensive one. The reason why I chose this particular camera is first, it can record in 1080p. However, I do all of my recordings and all of my teaching in 720p. That is sufficient. It's pretty rare that your students are going to have devices at home that are super high resolution anyway. And even if they did, it's not necessary to spend a whole bunch of extra money just to have 4K. 720 is good enough, and this video is shot in 720. The other reason why I chose the C922 camera is because people have written reviews about it in comparison to other cameras and said that it has a sensitive sensor. Not all cameras are the same. Some cameras are going to be a little bit dim, and so your room looks like this, and that's not what you want. It's important to have a sensitive sensor, and if you don't, then you need to compensate by having lots of extra lighting in your room. And you can also play around with your camera settings as well to increase the exposure, increase the gain, increase the contrast perhaps. Although if you have to do that, you're going to end up losing a little bit of image quality as well. I wanted my students to really be able to see me easily and clearly. Anyway, that's enough talk about cameras. Now I want to talk about the whiteboard, the lights that you're using, and the camera in how it relates to those. Right now, this video is being shot off of my main camera, and I have another one that I have purchased, and it's in the mail. I might do a follow-up video later on. The reason why I want to have a two-camera setup is so that I can have one that is always optimized to show the whiteboard itself. And I'll just talk about that right now. Currently, my camera has the zoom all the way off. So it's zoomed out as much as possible, and that would allow me to stand to the side of my whiteboard while I'm talking. So I can lecture, I can gesture, and if you're going to have a big whiteboard like this, which I think you really should, especially if you're online teaching, because you can write more on it, it's important to be very aware of what your students see. For example, I can be writing and talking, but my body is in the way. My body is blocking. You always want to gesture from the side, and it's a really good idea to use a laser pointer, because if you got the laser pointer in your hand, then it's going to be very natural that you will not just kind of get in front of the whiteboard by accident. Another thing you can do is just find a pointer, find a wand on eBay or Amazon, and use that when you're gesturing. That will allow you to gesture very accurately, and your arm won't be in the way. That's more professional. It's an improvement. It sounds small, and in some ways it is a little bit trivial, but you can get a great wand for just a couple dollars. Now, with the camera zoomed out the way it is now so that I am in frame, that means that the whiteboard is a little bit smaller and it's a little bit harder to read. When you are watching this video to make evaluations, and when you're watching your own videos to make evaluations, be sure to do it full screen. And one consideration that you can make is to watch it not only at your computer, but using a tablet as well, because a lot of your students, especially if they're Chinese, they're not going to have a computer. They're going to have a tablet. That's a much smaller display. And you want to know that the picture of your whiteboard is legible. And so here I am, I'm standing, I'm walking around the room. Even with my camera zoomed all the way out, it frequently cuts off the top of my head, or it might cut off part of my body when I'm standing to the side of the whiteboard, and we don't want that. That's not very professional. So that's one of the reasons that you might want to have a second camera that's optimized. Now, with the Logitech cameras, they do have zoom control on them. Not every camera can zoom in and out like this. And as you can see, once I have zoomed in, now it is possible for me to pan and tilt. I can go up and down, I can go left and right. So if I play around with this, then maybe something like this is optimal. Or maybe I just want to keep it centered. But with a multiple camera setup, you can get the view of your whiteboard optimized and keep it optimized. So every time it's time for you to switch views while you're teaching, you don't have to waste time zooming in and then panning around. And so now the whiteboard is zoomed in, which can be useful. It's a little bit easier to read something that has been written smaller. When you are doing testing for your own setup, you want to find out if it's going to be necessary to change the size that you're writing with, or maybe zoom in. There's all sorts of different ways that you can compensate, but the bottom line is making sure your students have a good view. In my current setup, my camera is right about here. From here straight out. It is possible to, of course, move your camera around a little bit. And what would usually be ideal to avoid distortion would be to have your camera positioned dead center, straight out from your whiteboard. But if you find that you are cutting off your head or something like that, then you can position it higher or lower. And if you do that, you will introduce distortion. And what will happen is that, and now this is extremely exaggerated, but you'll end up with a keystone shape. It kind of looks like that, or it'll go the opposite direction. And it'll look kind of like that. So do keep that into consideration. If you don't have a perfect rectangle for your students to look at, now you know what's causing it. It's because your camera isn't positioned close enough to dead center. That's where that distortion gets introduced. Now, if you look right here, there's this white spot. And if I draw a line through that white spot, it's almost impossible to see that line right there. That white spot is a reflection from one of my lights in the room. And what's interesting about that particular reflection is that it is bouncing off of a window to show a light that actually has something in front of it. So if I'm here, or if I put my face directly in front of that reflection, I cannot look at that light directly. That light is coming from the side where I have a window in the wall. So I need to make sure my shades are down when I'm teaching. And there are a lot of considerations for lighting itself. I'm going to use my phone to just show a quick example of my lighting setup. These are called soft boxes. I have two of them. Soft boxes are used in photography and in making films as well. And basically, they allow you to have a source of bright light that you can aim around. And so those things are usually, they're mounted on a pole, and you can direct them around. I already have some videos that talk about how to set up your soft boxes. So I'm not going to really go into that in this video. But when it comes to online teaching, when there's a whiteboard in the room, it becomes important to address issues of glare. You cannot have any lights that are directly pointing at the whiteboard. And as a general rule of thumb, if I put my head anywhere in frame of the whiteboard itself, if I can see a light, then that light's creating a reflection at that point on the whiteboard. So that's something you can do. You can just stand in front of the whiteboard and kind of look around a little bit. Indirect lighting is your friend for having a good studio experience. And so what that means is it's really good to bounce your lights off of a white wall, which is what I have in front of my computer. And you'll notice my other walls are not white because I don't want them to splash too much light around and then cause contrast issues on the whiteboard. I don't want too much light over there. But behind my computer, I have two more lights that are just kind of lamp lights, but they are incredibly powerful. They put out a lot of light. And that just hits a wall, it comes back, it's very well diffused, and because it is well diffused, it lights up my face from every angle, kind of like a makeup mirror. So now I don't have shadows from my nose or shadows from my eye sockets. If I turn off the lights that I just mentioned, then you can see how it changes my face, the shadows on my face, and the room itself. So all of that is stuff that you want to take under consideration when it comes to adding a whiteboard to your online teaching setup and still maintaining good video quality for that whiteboard itself. It's a little bit more complicated than just lighting up your face because whiteboards are so highly reflective, and you want to not have any reflections on it. You want it to be as evenly lit as possible. Just as a point of reference, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, this whiteboard is 36 inches by 30 inches, 30 by 36. And it is presently located approximately 7 feet and 4 inches from my camera. So about 88 inches from the camera, which is quite a distance. An online teaching setup can end up taking quite a bit of space. I have another camera coming, as well as a tripod for mounting it. The tripod is going to be really handy because what I can do is just put some masking tape on the floor, and that will allow me to get it into position very quickly before class, and it's just ready to go. And then after class, I just haul it away, get it out of the room. I'm not wasting time configuring my lighting setup or configuring my camera every time that I decide I want to begin using my whiteboard during a meeting. I think that'll be just kind of a professional thing to do. Now, one thing you can do also is just bring your whiteboard really close to your computer and use your whiteboard as a backdrop. Although, if you do that, you will find that, well, if I'm sitting, I'm kind of directly in front of it, aren't I? And it's easy for my chair to get into view. I've got to make sure I tuck that in. And so maybe here I am, I'm standing. My camera's already zoomed out as much as it can zoom out. So it's not as easy to do this. You're not going to get results that are as good. And as you can see, part of my whiteboard is kind of cut off here, isn't it? So I'm not able to use the whole thing if it's really close, which could be a limitation if you do something such as preparing your whiteboard before class. So it's already got a whole bunch of notes on it, and you're going to use that for teaching. When you do buy a whiteboard, if you're going to shop and get a big one, I recommend making sure you buy one that's magnetic, and also get one that has two sides so you can flip it over and keep teaching. So that's my primer on teaching with an online whiteboard and having good video quality with it when you do so. I can't think of much anything else to add, but as I said, I am preparing for a multiple camera setup, and I'll probably learn some new things along the way. I'm going to start using my whiteboard a lot more frequently when I am teaching my classes. So as I find new tips and tricks to share, I'll be coming out with new content. Be sure to like and subscribe.